I'm 44. I met my ex when I was 21 and he was 22. Well, we got married in 2001, and then I found out right after our fourth child was born. I got divorced 9 years ago. I had one boyfriend before I met my ex, and it was a short relationship, but I thought a normal relationship. I didn't date much, and I was a quiet person, and I had a lot of hearing loss problems as a child. I never really expected much. I thought if I waited for the right person to come, they would come. And then when I met him, I thought an instant connection. And I thought this is the answer to my prayers. This makes up for, the lack of relationships in the past. And he was very normal in the beginning. And I look for signs. How did I not know? What did I miss? But I don't think there was anything to miss at the beginning. I went to check my Facebook page one night and I used his laptop that was in the living room, and I went to get on my account and I noticed that an account was already open and it had a female profile and a female name. And then I looked a little closer and realized that it was his account. He was talking about our sex life and how boring it was. And he was chatting with what he said were former students, but I don't know if they were actually former students or not, and asking them to describe what they're wearing, their underwear, and then talking about how aroused he was with these girls. They were high school age or older, I don't really know. And when I asked him about it, he started screaming that they were former students and they were not straight as he was not straight, and that they were the only friends he had, and how could I try to keep him from them? And it kind of devolved from there. Well, after I found his Facebook page, I went and I searched through the house, specifically the room that he had his computer in, because I thought there's no way there's nothing. Where I thought there were spare computer parts and what have you, I started pulling out lingerie, clothes, shoes, sex toys. It was a sizable pile. And I couldn't believe that this was in my home, and I've been living with it. And I had no idea that it was there. After I found those clothes, I found a lot of gay websites where you would meet other gay men. And then I found different female names that he used on different websites. I didn't find any conversations between potential dates or what have you, but I found pictures of him dressed like a woman. And he put videos of himself on there dressed like a woman. I found a lot of pictures of what looked like teen girls, but may have not been actual teens. Like maybe they were older, but they were meant to look like teenagers. And then I found a lot of men. I think they were men that looked like women, men with gigantic boobs. It was all extreme. It was such a shocking experience. It was like a whole other side to him that I almost couldn't believe. When did he do all this while we were married? Was it after I went to bed, a day after taking care of babies and doing housework, while he sat down there doing what I thought was his schoolwork? All those times he could have helped, or he could have been a parent, or he could have been a father. And instead, this is what he chose to do. And then he turns around and blames me and the rest of the world for being closed-minded and ignorant. When he finally got home, I did confront him because it was sitting right there. Instead of feeling bad about it, he started bragging about it and saying that he looked so great in these clothes and that we could share clothes and it didn't cost anything. He got them from the thrift store. And so I pulled a pair of shoes with a price tag on them still out, because everything he said was a lie. And I thought he would at least explain himself or feel a little contrite, but not at all. He had the attitude that now that you know, you have to deal with it and you don't have a choice about it. It took a second before I started crying after we were looking at this pile of clothes, and he did not care. It was like he was just a different person. Here, instead of my husband that I thought I knew, it was an absolute stranger who just simply didn't care. And he left the room after a while with me still crying. Everything changed the second I found out There were times when he would want me to wear things to work. And I would say, why in the world would I wear this to work? And then sometimes he would just give me what I thought were gifts of something he had picked up, later to find out that he bought them for himself. And they either didn't fit or he was tired of them. And he gave me these things to wear instead. And then after I found this stuff and things had calmed down a little, he suggested that we share clothes. It was really offensive too. I'm looking at this pile of things and I'm thinking, this is what you think a woman is? I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know what to do. He didn't say don't tell anyone, but how could I? I mean, I don't know if I knew that people were transgender when I was that age, but I didn't know that they got married and they lived a secret life. I didn't want the whole world to know, and I didn't want it to get back to the kids to ever find out. So I kept it a secret. And then I finally told my parents after we'd split up and I moved in with them. My mother closed her eyes and said she just couldn't hear anymore because it was such a strange thing. And my dad didn't understand what I was talking about. He had no idea this could happen either. And I didn't tell his parents. And then it turns out my ex put on his Reddit page that they already knew that he'd been dressing here and there since childhood. These people knew and they did not tell me. And then they blamed me for the divorce. I mean, I thought they were on my side and I thought they would see the things that were happening to me and the children and be at least sympathetic or at least try to help us also. But they absolutely turned, or they wouldn't speak to us, or they would blame me for things going wrong. He had sent pictures of himself dressed as a woman to different students that were his friends. I guess he called them his friends. And those students spread them through the school, of course. And so the school knew. There was a relative of one of the kids that worked with my coworker or my mutual friend. And so she knew, but she didn't tell me either. And that was the case with most of the people who knew both of us and knew about him. They either said that we didn't know how to tell you or that it wasn't our place to tell you. I wish they would have. Anyone would have clued me in. It felt like this great cosmic joke after a while. Who didn't know? His coworkers knew, his students knew, his former coworkers knew, his friends knew, his family knew. The only person that didn't know was me. I have 4 children together, 3 girls, and the youngest is a boy. When we found out when I was pregnant, he kind of panicked about it, and he kept saying he couldn't parent a boy. And I didn't know what he meant by that. And I was trying to reassure him that baby boys and baby girls are pretty much the same, but he wouldn't explain any further what he was talking about. I didn't really know what to make of it. I still don't know what to make of it because they see him every other weekend. I do wonder that the first baby was a boy. Would that have been the end of our marriage? I wish he had explained further when I was pregnant what in the world he meant by that. I mean, was that the red flag that I missed? I don't know. I just found it really odd. But he was stressed from his job. He always suffered from depression. I thought maybe this was an additional stress because it was something new. I don't know. I'm sure that was a factor in it. But he was never really involved in the kids when they were babies. I kept making excuses for him. And then I thought maybe, some men just aren't interested in the babies. And then he was teaching, which takes up a lot of time, after school. So I thought, well, he's just really involved in his job. And I had excuse after excuse after excuse. I guess I just missed the bigger picture. I don't know. Towards the end, he started making things more difficult for us. If I make things hard enough, I don't want to be the one to leave the relationship. I want to force you to do it so I can say that you filed for divorce. Therefore, I can be the victim in this situation. He started hormones maybe a couple of years after we split up, what I call his coming out letter to me and some of his family. And it was about how he had started on hormones and he'd grown breasts, taking voice lessons to sound like a woman. He got his testicles removed, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I don't think he looks like a woman. I don't know what he sees when he looks in the mirror. He looks like a man with longish hair and breath. This is worth giving up 4 kids in a marriage so he can look like that. I call it the narrative. He said the same things where he felt like this as a kid, where he dressed in his sister's clothes and he experimented in junior high, and he was always like this. Well, he changed his story a lot. Sometimes it was, oh, I always knew. And sometimes it was, oh, I've just discovered this after so many years of marriage. People say, oh, this poor person, they made this great discovery about themselves and now you're divorcing. Why can't you be a supportive person? But that's not the truth. The truth is he absolutely did know and he got married anyways. That was really hard to take. And then he tried to say that I am a closeted bisexual and that if I would just be honest about my sexuality, that we could stay together. And I said, I'm not bisexual, I'm straight, and you're not a woman. So why would I need to be bisexual to stay in this marriage? When I found out, I didn't know that happened to people at all. And then you contact the GLAAD people, and it's just for people who had gay husbands. There's no one that wanted to touch my situation. People would either think that it was funny somehow, or they would be so horrified that they wouldn't know what to say, because what do you say? He would insinuate that it was my problem and that it was just crazy of me not to be accepting of this. I wanted to leave, but I thought, we're married, we have 4 kids, we have good jobs, we have a house, a life. Maybe I should try to live with it. Maybe it's me and I'm just not open-minded, because then he would get on me about how I should, be able to live with this. And so I thought, well, I could give it a shot. I can work on it. But every time I saw anything related to it, I would feel like I was going to be sick. And I didn't know how in the world we would manage with the children being this also. And then I quickly realized that he didn't dress up as a woman to do womanly things. He didn't dress up to watch the children or to do the dishes or any common female thing. He got dressed up because it aroused him. I didn't understand at all, but he wanted the kids to know and he wanted us to go out in public like that. But it was so 100% a fetish. He'd get home and he would just start yelling and yell for hours about all the ways I failed him and everything he hated about the relationship and what we should do and this and that. I mean, he'd been a depressed and angry person, but he'd never taken it out on me except to maybe yell. And then it got to the point where I would be in his way but not know it, and he would sigh really loud, and then he started sighing and pushing me. And then if a kid touched something, he would take their hand and smack it on the table. He blamed me and said my lack of good parenting has forced him to take more action to stop the kids from doing what they were doing. Although the kids were the oldest was 6, and then the youngest was an infant. So he was constantly angry. I told him no, basically. And because I did, this person who's now a stranger, but now an angry stranger living in our house. I started thinking, if he attacks me while I live, how many kids can I grab on the way out of the house? Will we all survive? Is he just going to murder me in my sleep because he's that angry? But all the time that we had spent together before children, and I really thought that we started with a good marriage. We got along. He was funny. We had the same life goals. It's like things changed and I didn't know they were changing, or I didn't know that that's what his true intent was. So it turns out that because he wasn't attracted to me, that he had to get himself ready to perform. And so he'd be downstairs on his computer where I thought he was doing work for school, and instead he would be watching porn. I had surgeries during our marriage and I never took the painkillers. And he eventually told me that he took them before we had sex, and he would refill prescriptions and continue to do this because he had to be in some sort of altered state of mind in order to have heterosexual sex with me. And I felt like a body, like it didn't matter who I was in bed. He would want me to wear like nylons, but we wouldn't actually have sex. be fixated on these nylons, or he would want me to wear really specific clothes. It made me wonder who in the world I married. And there was never a lot of passion between us, but I threw in his depression. And I thought, some people are just like this, and I'm not perfect. Why wouldn't I give him a pass on a lot of these things? Because that's what people do. That's a marriage. He wouldn't specifically say, I'm the woman now and you're the man, but it was heavily implied, and it to the point where I didn't feel like I had a choice. And he was like a different person to have sex with too. Like, he was a stranger, and I would ask him to stop and he would not stop, or he'd want to do something that was painful to me, but he didn't seem to care. Part of me thinks that he used me like I could have been any woman. It's just the fact that I was a woman was the part that was useful to him. On my daughter's phone, he had his Amazon account so she could see the things that he was buying. And she showed me one where it was a wig that looked exactly like my hair. That was kind of mind-blowing to me, that he would want to be a literal copy of myself. What he did our whole marriage is just study me and maybe my daughters because we were female. He shaved all his body hair off. I just found it incredibly unattractive, and he got mad. Every step he took to be more of a woman in his eyes was less attractive to me. We didn't have much of a sex life after I found out. He tried my clothes on. I don't know how many or what he did, but I know that he did try them on. And so when the kids, some of them grew, I worried that he would try some of their things on while they weren't there. And then once the oldest told me that he makes her take pictures of him dressed in women's clothes, and she doesn't feel like she has a choice to say no to him, because no one truly has a choice to say no to him. He's that kind of person. She doesn't leave anything in his house. So I don't know if she has an inkling of what he does, or if that's just, I don't want to ask her because I don't want to put in her mind if she doesn't know that this could happen. He buys them underwear. Well, not my son, but all the girls' underwear, because that's one of his fetishes, where it seems like a nice gesture that he would buy a 10-year-old some new underwear. But part of me wonders why he's doing this and not buying them shoes. In our divorce agreement, it said that he is not allowed to have anything sexually, in front of the children whatsoever, meaning that he couldn't come out to them. When my oldest was 11, she came home and said that he told her that he wanted to be a woman, or that he was a woman. I'm not sure how she phrased it. She was crying. She didn't want to go back to his house. He was angry that she was upset. He kept insisting that she come back. CPS got involved because I called them and said, I don't know what to do anymore. It's right here that he shouldn't have told them. She's clearly upset. He's not cooperating with me. He won't tell me or her his further plans, making every time they go to his house a new shock to them. And then he told the other kids years later, my youngest, the boy, won't talk about it. He's never talked about it, even to school counselors, what have you. And depending on his mood, sometimes it seems like he's pretty normal. And other times they say, Dad cried. We're still his therapist. He talks to us like we're adults. He talks to them about wanting to kill himself. 2 of my kids are gender questioning, I guess is a good way to put it right now, which is kind of the new thing in they're teenagers, and I'm fine with it. And it may have happened if he was their father or not. But once he got wind of them saying they're maybe not straight, he went off with it and has convinced one that she's a boy, and then also convinced them that I'm transphobic and that it's a horrible environment for them to live with me because they'll never be their true selves as long as they're near me, which is not true. If I try to question a child on anything with this topic, then they just repeat things that he has said about how I'm a transphobic bigot and whatever other word they can throw at me, when in actuality, I'm just worried for them. He sued me for custody of all the children after 8 years of our divorce. He had left us when my youngest just turned 1. So we went through a whole year of back and forth. And then we got a guardian ad litem to talk to the children. And so I had to fill out a questionnaire about our family life and our situation and what have you. And the very last question was, why do you feel that your ex would not be a good partner or a good parent to your children? And so I took that question seriously. And I wrote a good 10 pages of reasons why he would not be a good parent. And they were not for anyone to see but the guardian. I didn't hold anything back. And so it never made it to court because they set it up so he would lose. If he lost in court, he would lose all custody. And so the day before we were due in court, he dropped the case and I got to keep my children. I did not have any idea that he was going to sue for custody. I didn't think that he was that interested. He never got a child ready for school. He barely ever fed a baby. He's not home. He has a job. Who would be watching the children? Who would get them on the bus? Who would pick them up from after school practices? Who would take them to the dentist? These are all things that he had never one time done. And yet 8 years later, I'm such a terrible parent, according to him, that he has to take over. It was an incredibly difficult year, thinking that someone would believe his lies and I would lose my kids. It's hard seeing it everywhere and story after story. So-and-so became a woman and they're doing these great things as a woman. Well, that's great, but no one ever talks about the families and the kids, and it's like we don't matter. Well, they had their lives, they made their choices, didn't make that choice. Nothing changes. I mean, it doesn't go away. It doesn't get easier living with someone like that. We're divorced, and yet every action he takes still affects my kids, still affects me, still affects our financial situation, and it never stops. I didn't think that he would grow boobs, but there they are. I didn't think that he would have a wig that looked like my hair, but there it is. Or that he would have more surgery, but it never stops. He got a girlfriend. I laid awake at night wondering if this woman knew about him. I couldn't let another person go through what I went through. And so I called her one day and she knew. I don't think she knew the extent because everything he said was a partial truth. But at least she knew enough that it wouldn't be, I thought, a shock to her. He was really angry that I called her. That's the decent thing to do. I mean, how could you possibly do this to two people? They both hate me, but at least he wouldn't have been able to do that to someone else. I thought that his next partner would be a man, because after I found out, our sex life changed. I wanted no part of it at all. It felt beyond strange. So I was surprised when he had a girlfriend. I like to think that I'm still breathing at the end of it. I know that's an extreme one, but no matter what happens, we'll still be breathing. And I think with the kids, no matter what happens, the kids and I will be together. It doesn't matter if we have no money or if he's throwing something else at us, or if I think for a moment that things are impossible or they're going downhill. Nothing's impossible. It's been hard since the divorce, but it's better than living with him. I'm not being crazy and I'm not being transphobic. I didn't think I was strong enough to divorce him. I'd never been through it before. I didn't know how in the world I was going to manage with 4 little kids, but we made it. There's always people that have been through the same thing as you, or that can help you. It made me feel less alone. I had more of a backbone than I thought I did. I mean, now I'm proud of myself for making it all the way through.